All right, thank you so much for staying with us. Vice President Senator Kashim Shettima says Nigeria secured over $400 million in new investment commitments for renewable energy manufacturing value chains. Speaking at the launch of the Renewable Energy Innovation Forum in Abuja, Senator Shettima said the value chain covers solar panel assembly, battery recycling, and local component production. The Vice President said investment commitments were made through the engagement facilitated under the forum. He said Nigeria's energy transition presents an investment opportunity worth over $410 billion by 2060. Shettima comments followed the federal government's efforts to localize renewable energy manufacturing and position the country for Africa's clean energy hub. The Vice President said Nigeria's clean energy shift is not just an environmental imperative, but a strategic economic move to build industries, create jobs, and strengthen national energy security. My guest is Noel Okodi. She's the research lead Nigeria Solar Marketplace. Noel, it's good to see you. Thank you so very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, I think I should ask how far we've gone with the issue of energy transition. Are we making the right move? Are we moving as we ought to move?
Yes, I think Nigeria's tone is quite different on the energy transition than developed countries, as it should be, because our issues are fundamentally different. So we've mostly been focusing on energy access as opposed to an energy transition from fossil fuels to clean energy. So for Nigeria, a huge part of our energy transition, using that word loosely, involves gas. And that's because roughly 90 million Nigerians don't have access to electricity, less than 10% have access to clean cooking. And this means that we're not just trying to transition from fossil fuels to clean energy like developed countries are doing, but we're trying to also reduce the deficit in energy access. So far, we've seen a lot of progress in terms of gas investments, but we're not seeing it trickle down as quickly to Nigeria. And so in terms of electricity access, that hasn't really improved, but we are seeing positive signals, especially in terms of renewable energy. In the past, as of 2025, Nigeria has about 125 mini grids and 1 million solar home systems have been installed. So that translates to about 5 million Nigerians having access to electricity since the REA came on board. This isn't as quick as we would like, but we're definitely seeing momentum and there's demand increasing as well as supply.
I think the REA has been out lately, looking at the forum they had recently and talking about domesticating the production of renewable energy manufacturing value chain. For me, my question to you really would be, how feasible is this? Investment of over $400 million was signed at that meeting, so state governors and all present.
Yeah, so I think it's obvious that obviously you can't say that nothing is impossible, everything is possible, but obviously there are significant challenges to achieving local manufacturing in Nigeria. And this isn't even exclusive to the clean energy space or solar. It's like across Nigeria's manufacturing value chain. The biggest issue is infrastructure. So in terms of power, logistics, and then when it comes to solar PV specifically, there's also not enough testing facilities to even ensure that what's being produced is meeting international standards or even our own national standards. And then even beyond that, we've seen some movement. So there's a company called Oxanu that has a 100 megawatt capacity solar PV production facility. And that's possible thanks to funding and thanks to support from the REA. But then there are still issues around like perception because I guess it's expected that Nigerians, because we don't have that much track record with manufacturing, Nigerian consumers don't really see Nigerian produced solar PV as meeting the standards of international solar PV. And this doesn't mean that Nigerian products aren't good, but there's just that perception because obviously we don't have as much track record as a country like China. So these are things that the government needs to focus on. So first of all, clearing the infrastructure bottlenecks, also improving the perception of Nigerian products. And this means setting up testing facilities, making sure that there are national standards that are adhered to, and even setting local content guidelines. So saying that these guidelines should be progressive, obviously, because you don't want to stifle supply or demand. But then saying that, for instance, maybe all government procurement of solar PV has to be locally manufactured. So starting with the government and then trickling down to Nigerian consumers. Basically, it's not impossible, but there are significant hurdles that need to be addressed. And hopefully this $400 million investment goes to unlocking some of these issues.
Interesting stuff. I think I agree with you. Charity, they say, begins at home. We must, start from the top and all. Well, investments in renewable energy. For me, I'm a business journalist. I said that yesterday. I was talking to. So I'm always interested in the naira and kobo. That excites me a lot. $400 million is a lot of money. But what really at the moment? Let's look at return on investment in renewables at the moment. How good is it? What kind of business? How attractive is that business at this time?
Also, I guess if you compare to the power sector, it's super attractive. This is because, first of all, you know that there's a deficit created by the power sector not being obviously grid unreliability, not enough supply from Nigeria to meet the needs of Nigerians, and also the need for backup solutions. So you're seeing a lot of Nigerians adopting solar. With the increase in prices of diesel and petrol as well, solar is looking like a more attractive option. So there's a huge potential for demand. And there are also companies that are meeting this demand. So there are companies in the mini-grid space serving rural communities. There are companies in the C&I space serving businesses. There are companies in the solar home system space and inverter space serving residential estates and households. There is significant upside. And we've also seen companies raising funds, companies like Arnergy, raising significant funds. We've seen exits in the sector as well. I think that there's upside. And also it helps that unlike the power sector, unlike the on-grid sector, the government is really focused, especially through the RAA, is really focused on reducing the bottlenecks. There's not a lot of government intervention. So it's like between the between the client and the supplier, they have one-on-one agreements, unlike the power sector where there are all these huge legacy debts and tariffs are not cost reflective. All those issues don't exist in the off-grid value chain, even though, of course, there are issues in the off-grid value chain, but it's more straightforward to see how an investor or a company can make its money back if the fundamentals are right.
Brilliant stuff. Well, you've touched on the grid, and many have talked about, should I use the word sustainability of that grid for a country of over 200 million persons, and we are talking about a grid of about 6,000 megawatts, 5,000 megawatts at the moment. So my question is, let's really clearly spell out the options at this time. Do we need mini grids? How many of them do we have? We have the State Electricity Act. What is that doing for us?
Yes, so there are a lot of initiatives, but at the end of the day, the grid still needs to work. I mean, Nigeria still needs grid power. So whether it comes from obviously states setting up their own generation plans, whether it comes from the regional power plants that still exist today, there needs to be synergy in how all these initiatives are deployed so that there's no confusion. So I know that there was some confusion between Enugu's company. So there just needs to be clarity there. But in terms of the grid working, I think that is essential. So, and that requires private sector involvement. There needs to be more private sector involvement in the private sector. And of course, in the power sector, and of course, we've seen some of that with privatization, but we haven't reaped the rewards because we haven't done it properly, to be very honest. Legacy debts still exist. Tariffs have not been cost reflective in actually never. Even when they become cost reflective, fundamentals change and then tariffs are not updated to reflect the existing current realities. So basically, we need to see a clearing of the bottlenecks. And we're already seeing this in the upstream oil and gas sector, where the government is really focused on just creating an enabling environment for companies to make investments. We also need to see that in the power sector, where the government is just focused on creating an enabling environment so that the private sector can come into play.
And we see that there's a lot of attraction coming there. Shell Bonga was what we're talking about earlier. Again, another investment from, I think, Shell too. So what do you think is happening around the oil and gas space if you're to do your evaluation, considered what we had before now?
Yeah, so I think there's very different energy between the Tinubu administration and the Buhari administration. The Buhari administration was quite... I'm trying to think of a good word to use,
right word.
But not very focused on executing or like I said, creating. I think the role of government essentially is to create an enabling environment for the private sector to play, and that's exactly what's happening in upstream oil and gas, where a lot of directives have been signed with fiscal incentives, and also just ensuring that timelines are reduced, execution timelines are reduced. The Tinubu administration is actively courting companies, listening to them and implementing directives that address their issues. And of course, that means that the private sector is more interested in Nigeria's oil and gas sector, upstream at least. So you're seeing, like you said, the Shell investment, also Renaissance Energy investment, which is a consortium of local companies. So it's not just even international oil companies, even local oil companies are investing more money now than they did in maybe 2022. And yeah, so it's just, I think it's very simple. Government creates an enabling environment, and the private sector will come in.
That's what we've always talked about, that sometimes government doesn't really need to do business, just create that environment. I heard Mr. Tony Elumelu said it clearly, what they were losing to all theft before now and what is happening at the moment, saying they're able to get up this 98% of what their production. And that takes me to my final question to you. Increased oil production, crude production, is what the NUPRC has been talking about. Aside from what happened with Pengassan, I think we're doing about 1.8 million barrels per day. So we're looking at 2.5 million for 2026. I don't think that's much of a tall order. But what do you make of increased production? How does that, add to our bread and butter?
So I think 2.5 million is actually a tall order. It's not something that's easy. Yes, because it's not an easy number. I mean, it's easy to say, but it's not easy to get. But obviously, with all the final investment decisions being announced, in the coming years, we should see Nigeria's oil production increase if fundamentals remain the same. But I'm skeptical about 2026, I must say, about us achieving that. Yeah, it takes a lot more. It takes time and it takes investment. We're seeing investments, we just need a bit of time. But in terms of the global market as well, we're seeing between the geopolitical issues between China and the US, and also there's a lot of supply right now with weaker demand. The outlook for oil prices is a bit bearish to moderate. We don't expect to see any significant spikes this year, but of course, Nigeria's production has been stable, more or less. But yeah, the outlook is, I guess, moderate. I'm not saying 2.5 next year, but I think we'll still keep seeing steady increments as the months go on.
So we'll keep getting more of the petrodollar coming into our country, one way or the other. I must thank you so much. Interesting conversation with you as always. Noel Okodi is a research lead, Nigeria's solar market space. Do have a great one. Enjoy the rest of your day. And hope to see you in the studio soon.
Thank you. You too. Bye.
Bye-bye. All right, then, well, it's time.